While not everyone accepts the idea of karma, this tale might make you reconsider. After HOA Karen, a woman who prided herself on mastering every bylaw, confiscated my $78,000 boat and declared it the property of the Homeowners Association, I did something she absolutely did not anticipate. I remained patient. A mere 48 hours later, a full FBI tactical unit was conducting a raid on her home. Rest assured, I will recount precisely what transpired. I am Mike Peterson, a 38-year-old software engineer who telecommutes for a Silicon Valley tech firm. Following my divorce 3 years ago, I felt the need for a new beginning in a tranquil setting. This is how I came to purchase a lovely lakefront house in Lakeside Estates, a gated community in Tampa, Florida. The property was ideal: 3 bedrooms, a generous yard, and most importantly, a private dock where I could moor the 24-foot leisure boat I had long dreamed of owning. A week after moving in, I acquired the boat, a brilliant white chaparral with blue detailing that set me back $78,000. It was a considerable portion of my savings, but the weekend serenity it offered made it worth every dollar. For the initial month, life was idyllic. I would dedicate my weekdays to coding in my home office and my weekends to navigating the lake, fishing, or simply relaxing with a cold beverage and a good book. The Florida sun was the perfect antidote after years in the overcast hustle of San Francisco. My neighbors seemed pleasant enough, mostly retirees and other professionals who were generally private. I was beginning to feel certain I had made the correct choice when the peace of my new existence was abruptly broken one Saturday morning by a sharp rap on my front door. That was my first encounter with Patricia Wilkins, the 54-year-old HOA president, known covertly throughout the neighborhood as the Karen. Patricia was a widow employed by a local real estate agency, residing 3 houses away with her 2 shrill Pomeranians. She appeared on my porch with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer sunglasses resting on her head, and a clipboard in her grasp, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. From that first meeting, when she visited under the guise of welcoming me but was actually there to inform me my mailbox was an unapproved shade of white, I suspected we would not become friends. "The mailbox should be eggshell, not bright white," she stated, her tone dripping with faint sweetness while her gaze remained frigid. "You will find the authorized color palette in Section 6.3 of the HOA guidelines. I will email a violation notice as a formality." And with that, before I could utter a word, she was clicking down my driveway in her pricey heels, her blonde bob moving with each forceful step. I remained in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, baffled by what had just occurred. Little did I realize, this was merely the first move in what would escalate into an outright conflict. After that initial run-in, the violation notices arrived with relentless regularity. My lawn was 2.1 inches high. The maximum allowed was 2 inches. My trash receptacle was visible from the road on a day other than collection day. The trim on my windows required a new coat of paint. The bird feeder in my backyard constituted unauthorized wildlife encouragement. It was draining, but I did my best to comply, hoping she would eventually exhaust her list of grievances. I even extended an invitation for coffee one afternoon, thinking we might establish some common ground. That was a significant error. She spent the duration of our meeting scouring my home for further infractions and departed with a look in her eyes that unsettled me. "You know, Mr. Peterson," she remarked as she left, pausing in my doorway to look back, "communities like Lakeside Estates hold their value because residents adhere to the rules. Some individuals move here from elsewhere and believe they can act as they please, but that is not our way." Her smile was taut and menacing. "I trust you will be a team player." The implication was unmistakable: conform or suffer the repercussions. I attempted to dismiss it, concentrating instead on acclimating to my new residence and taking pleasure in my boat on weekends. I got to know some of my other neighbors, among them Tom Reynolds, a retired police officer in his 60s who was my next-door neighbor. Tom was the antithesis of Patricia: relaxed, amiable, and genuinely willing to help. "Don't let Patricia bother you," he suggested one evening as we enjoyed beers on his dock. "She has been making life difficult for everyone since her husband passed away 5 years ago. It seems like she's overcompensating for something." Tom possessed a constant tan from his days spent fishing and a straightforward demeanor that I found refreshing after contending with Patricia's passive-aggressive methods. The situation intensified during the HOA's monthly meeting at the community center, a beige stucco structure with a dated interior that had a faint odor of mothballs and coffee. I went out of curiosity, eager to understand how these gatherings operated and perhaps to meet more of my neighbors. The room was only about half occupied, primarily by older residents who appeared to have accepted their fate. Patricia presided at the front with her apparent inner circle, a small group of sycophants who affirmed everything she said. The mood was strained, akin to being summoned to the principal's office. Patricia introduced a new regulation. No boats could be docked at private homes for more than 24 consecutive hours. The rule's specificity was not lost on me. I was the sole new homeowner with a boat. When the motion was put to a vote, I rose to voice my objection, asserting that private docks were part of our property rights as stipulated in the community's original charter. My voice trembled slightly. I've never been at ease with public disputes, but I was not about to surrender my boat dock without resistance. I bought my house precisely because it came with a private dock, I articulated, endeavoring to maintain a steady voice. The dock is on my land, and the original charter explicitly grants waterfront homeowners the right to keep boats at their private docks. This new rule would essentially cancel out a feature for which we all paid a premium. A few murmurs of assent from the audience gave me the fortitude to proceed. Moreover, the community marina lacks sufficient slips for all boat-owning residents. Where, precisely, are we expected to store them? Tom supported me, rising to speak to the assembly. This is simply another abuse of power, he stated plainly. The next thing we know, we won't be permitted to park our vehicles in our own driveways. I've resided here for 15 years, and I've seen more and more of our property rights eroded by arbitrary regulations. His years as a law enforcement officer were evident in his authoritative presence, and several other neighbors nodded their agreement. Patricia's face became red with rage, yet she kept her composure. The board is merely striving to uphold the aesthetic integrity of our community, she said calmly. Large boats project an unbecoming commercial feel in our residential haven. The way she stressed, made it plain she did not view me as a member of the community. The votes were counted, and Patricia's proposal was defeated, 7-6. It was a close call, but a win nonetheless. I experienced a brief feeling of victory as Patricia's smile faltered for an instant before she recovered her poise. But as the meeting concluded, I heard her whisper to Jenny Thompson, the timid, anxious-looking HOA secretary, "We will just have to handle this matter in a different way." Jenny agreed, though she appeared uneasy. The look of thinly veiled hostility Patricia cast in my direction sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't comprehend what differently entailed until the next morning when I went out onto my back porch, coffee in hand, anticipating the sight of my lovely boat sparkling in the morning sun. Instead, I found my boat dock entirely bare, with only the soft sound of lake water lapping against the wooden pilings, as though nothing had ever been moored there. Initially, I thought I was seeing things. I blinked multiple times, rubbed my eyes, and checked again. The dock remained empty. My magnificent chaparral, my pride and joy, my weekend sanctuary, was gone. The mooring ropes hung slack, swinging gently in the morning air. I set down my coffee mug and rushed down the steps to the water's edge, my heart hammering in my chest. I raced down to the dock, searching the lake in all directions, but there was no trace of it. Perhaps it had somehow broken free and floated away, but that seemed impossible. I was always careful about securing it, double-checking the knots each time. With trembling hands, I took out my phone and dialed the police to report a theft. While I waited, I walked back and forth along my dock, searching for any indication of a break-in or tampering. There was nothing out of the ordinary, just the void where my $78,000 investment should have been. My thoughts raced through various scenarios: professional thieves, teenage vandals. But deep down, I already had a strong suspicion about who was responsible. Officer Sarah Martinez showed up about 20 minutes later, a professional-looking woman in her mid-30s with an empathetic air. She had dark hair pulled into a neat bun and the calm demeanor of someone who had seen it all. She took down my detailed description of the boat, including the registration numbers, and noted when I had last seen it. As she was measuring the distance between my dock cleat, a familiar voice from the direction of my driveway sent a chill through me. "There is no need for the police, officer. No crime has occurred here," Patricia declared as she walked toward us, brandishing a folder filled with documents. She was attired in a sharp linen pantsuit that likely cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, looking as if she were headed to finalize a major real estate transaction. The boat was legally impounded by the HOA for a breach of community guidelines. She presented Officer Martinez with what appeared to be an official notice. "As you'll see, the board convened an emergency meeting last night and approved Regulation 42B, which forbids the docking of recreational vehicles over 20 feet at private residences. Mr. Peterson was in clear violation, and according to Section 8 of the HOA bylaws, The association is authorized to remedy such violations at the owner's expense. She gave me a smile of undisguised victory. Officer Martinez looked uneasy as she examined the documents. She leafed through the pages with a slight frown, then glanced between Patricia and me. I could sense her reluctance. She was aware that something was amiss, but there didn't seem to be a clear criminal act she could address. "I'm sorry, Mr. Peterson, but this seems to be a civil issue, not a criminal one. The document indicates the boat has been relocated to the community marina. You will have to settle this with your HOA or perhaps seek legal counsel." She offered an apologetic look before leaving me alone with Patricia. I was furious but struggled to keep my composure as I questioned how she had managed this. The vote had been defeated just the previous night, after all. Patricia's smile grew wider as she revealed that she had doctored the minutes from an old meeting, relabeled it as an emergency session to circumvent the 72-hour notification rule, and passed the regulation with only her small group of supporters. The casual way she admitted to falsifying records made me sick. She obviously had no fear of repercussions. "Your boat is now community property," she stated with smug contentment, inspecting her flawlessly manicured nails as if talking about something as trivial as the weather. "It will be used for the HOA board's retreat next weekend. You can take me to court if you wish, but I have 30 years of experience in real estate law." Her eyes shone with malice. "By the time your lawsuit reaches a judge, if it ever does, that boat will be long gone. That's the way it works, Mr. Peterson." Then she pivoted and walked off, leaving me standing there shocked and enraged. I immediately phoned Tom and recounted what had transpired. He was incensed but not shocked. "She's pulled similar stunts before, but this is more audacious than usual," he said grimly. "Let me place a few calls. I still have contacts in law enforcement who might be able to assist." I was grateful for his help, but I was starting to grasp that I was up against someone who had been getting away with this type of conduct for a long time. She understood the system and how to exploit it. Later that day, I drove to the community marina, a well-kept facility with around 30 boat slips at the lake's north end. And there it was, my boat, secured at the main dock. Patricia was displaying it to several other board members, behaving as though she had bought it herself. She was highlighting its features, stroking the polished hull as if it were her own. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I was about to confront them and create a commotion when I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Jenny Thompson, the HOA's secretary, glancing nervously behind her, her mousy brown hair falling over her face as she leaned in. "She does this to all the new residents who don't toe the line," she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. "I don't approve of it, but I'm powerless to stop her. I need this job." Her eyes scanned the area, evidently terrified of being seen with me. "My husband lost his job last year, and this is our sole income at the moment. I'm sorry." Before I could reply, she rushed off, disappearing into the small group of people who had gathered to admire the HOA's new vessel. It was then I understood that Patricia was used to bulldozing people without facing any consequences. She had established a small fiefdom here and governed it with an iron grip, while individuals like Jenny were too intimidated to challenge her. I was resolved to retrieve my boat, but I had to be strategic. A direct confrontation would clearly be ineffective. She held too much influence in this small community, with too many people either backing her or too fearful to stand against her. As I walked back to my car, seething with injustice, I checked my mailbox and discovered a letter that had been mistakenly delivered to my home. It was from the Internal Revenue Service and addressed to Patricia Wilkins. The envelope had an official appearance, with the formidable IRS logo in the corner. That's when the initial seed of a plan began to sprout in my mind. Perhaps there was a way to retaliate after all, not through a direct clash. I am not typically the kind of person to open someone else's mail, but considering the situation and the fact that it was in my mailbox, I made an exception. Seated at my kitchen table, I carefully slit open the envelope, my heart beating a little faster at having crossed this line. The letter was a notice of an audit for Patricia Wilkins, raising questions about several substantial deposits into her personal account that did not match her declared income. It appeared the IRS was curious about the origin of nearly $200,000 in unexplained funds over the last 2 years. The letter cited discrepancies and mentioned potential penalties in the formal, intimidating prose that only the IRS can perfect. I meticulously resealed the envelope, intending to accidentally deliver it to her myself after I had made a photocopy for my own files. Of course, This was no longer solely about my boat. If Patricia was engaged in financial misconduct, it could account for her hostile actions and misuse of authority. People with secrets often create diversions by targeting others. Before I confronted Patricia, I required more information. I contacted Tom Reynolds, my retired police officer neighbor, and laid out the situation over beers on his back porch. The setting sun cast long shadows over the lake as fishing boats made their way back to their docks. "That woman has been menacing this community for years," he grumbled, crushing an empty beer can in his weathered hand. "It's high time someone challenged her." Tom's face brightened with a new sense of purpose. I got the impression he had been seeking a way to bring Patricia down for a very long time. Tom put me in touch with his friend Marco Gonzalez, a local accountant who, it turned out, was an old college acquaintance of mine from a finance course we had taken together. Marco had aged gracefully, still in good shape with just hints of gray at his temples, and he still possessed the sharp intellect I recalled from our university days. When I told Marco about the suspicious IRS notice and my stolen boat, he offered to assist me in looking into Patricia's finances. "Financial records always leave a trail," Marco stated as we sat in his unassuming downtown office. Family photos of a wife and 2 teenage daughters adorned his desk. "Even the most clever criminals slip up with money. If she's concealing something, we will uncover it." His self-assurance was comforting, and his knowledge was indispensable. Using publicly accessible data and Tom's former law enforcement connections, we started to assemble a troubling narrative. Patricia had been in severe financial distress after her husband's death 5 years prior, coming close to foreclosure on her home. The mortgage lender had even begun proceedings, according to county records Tom managed to obtain. However, about 2 years ago, her financial state had inexplicably improved. She settled her mortgage in full, a sum exceeding $300,000, purchased a new Mercedes, began wearing costly jewelry, and took extravagant trips to Europe and the Caribbean, which she documented thoroughly on social media. The timing aligned with her becoming HOA president. "People don't just acquire that kind of money from thin air," Marco observed, presenting me with a timeline he had compiled of Patricia's financial turnaround. "Either she hit the lottery and failed to declare it, or she discovered an alternative income stream. And based on what you've told me about her, I doubt it's anything legal." I also succeeded in contacting Patricia's daughter, Linda, via social media. She was in her early 30s, residing in New York and working in the publishing industry. Based on her profile, I posed as a real estate agent researching successful property managers in the region and sent her a message inquiring about her mother's business methods. It was deceitful, I admit, but I needed information, and Linda appeared to be the only family contact I could locate. To my astonishment, she replied almost right away, seeming keen to discuss her mother, though not in the manner I had anticipated. Linda, who had a strained relationship with Patricia, revealed some intriguing details during our conversation. "Mom has always been fixated on appearances, but recently she's been spending money like it's nothing. New car, new jewelry. She even offered to help with my student loans, which is odd because she was nearly broke after Dad passed away. I declined the money. It just didn't feel right." She paused before continuing, "Between us, I've often wondered if Dad's import business was completely above board. He traveled frequently, especially to South America, and was extremely secretive about his merchandise." This new detail about Patricia's late husband added another dimension to the puzzle. Could he have been involved in illicit activities, and had Patricia somehow taken over the business after he died? I relayed this to Tom and Marco, who both thought it warranted further investigation. Marco assisted me in examining the HOA's financial records, which were theoretically accessible to all residents but were so deeply buried in bureaucratic complexities that no one ever bothered to check them. We had to submit formal requests and wait for Jenny to supply the copies, which she did anxiously, repeatedly glancing over her shoulder as if anticipating Patricia's sudden appearance. What we discovered was staggering. Substantial amounts of money were regularly moved from the HOA maintenance account to shell companies with names like Lakeside Property Services and Florida Coastal Maintenance, companies that seemed to have no existence beyond a post office box. The purported services rendered were vaguely labeled as landscaping, infrastructure upgrades, or community enhancement, but there was scant proof of any actual work having been performed. "These are classic indicators of embezzlement," Marco clarified, pointing out questionable transactions on the statements. "Money is sent to sham companies, and then it likely finds its way back to the person who orchestrated the scheme." He indicated a series of withdrawals that happened just before Patricia's extravagant purchases. The timing is too perfect to be a coincidence. The more we investigated, the more obvious the pattern became. Patricia had been exploiting her role as HOA president to seize property from new residents who defied her. She would then sell these items for personal gain, laundering the proceeds through the bogus maintenance companies. My boat was not the first casualty. There had been a classic automobile, an art collection, and even a vintage motorcycle, all confiscated under the pretext of HOA violations and then mysteriously disposed of, as the records showed. I dedicated days to locating former residents who had departed from lakeside estates under dubious circumstances. Many were hesitant to speak at first, but after I shared my own story, their accounts came flooding out. A clear pattern took shape. They would have a conflict with Patricia over a trivial infraction, then suddenly find themselves inundated with increasingly absurd HOA complaints until a valuable possession was seized. Shortly thereafter, many would simply give up and leave, selling their homes for less than market value, often to buyers who had some connection to Patricia. I found out that Patricia was already making arrangements to sell my boat to a buyer in Miami for $95,000, a tidy profit on my $78,000 purchase. She had advertised it on an exclusive broker's website using a different registration number. Marco discovered that Patricia had neglected to report over $450,000 in income from selling these items over the past 3 years, according to public tax records he could access through his professional resources. I had all the components of the puzzle, but not enough concrete evidence to file charges against her. It was infuriating to know what she was doing, but be unable to stop her. I thought about going to the police with our findings, but Tom advised that without irrefutable proof, Patricia might be able to portray it as a personal vendetta. We need to catch her in the act, he suggested, or find something so conclusive that she can't talk her way out of it. Then Tom called me late one night, his voice filled with urgency and excitement. Mike, you won't believe what I found in my old files. I was reviewing some cold cases I kept copies of after I retired. Force of habit, you know, and Patricia's name appeared in connection with a ring of high-end antiquity smugglers the FBI was investigating 5 years ago. The case went cold, but her late husband was suspected of being involved in selling stolen art and artifacts through his import business. The FBI might be very interested in what she's doing now. That was the final piece. This wasn't just about HOA corruption and a stolen boat. Patricia might be linked to international art theft. What began as a neighborhood disagreement was now a potential federal investigation. I felt a rush of adrenaline as Tom and I decided to present our findings to the FBI. At last, we might have a way to stop Patricia for good. Tom and I presented our case to FBI Special Agent David Chun, who specialized in financial crimes. Despite our evidence, he required more definitive proof of ongoing illegal activity. Her link to the old smuggling case is weak without more evidence, he clarified. However, he did confirm they had been monitoring a smuggler named Rodriguez for years. If she's tied to the Rodriguez network, this could be very significant, Chin stated. If we can document her selling property that isn't hers, particularly to known smuggling operations, that would provide us with the justification to proceed. I was not going to let Patricia get away with my boat. I got in touch with my college friend Ryan Miller in Miami, asking him to act as a prospective buyer ready to pay $100,000 in cash for my boat, no paperwork required. Ryan consented immediately. In the meantime, I secretly placed 2 GPS tracking devices on my boat, one visible and one hidden as a backup. Ryan met Patricia at the marina while wearing a hidden microphone, and I listened in from a nearby cafe. The conversation surpassed our wildest hopes. Patricia openly conceded that the boat was not hers and bragged about using the HOA to seize assets from uncooperative residents. I've done this dozens of times, she boasted. These tech guys move down here with their expensive toys, break a few minor rules, and suddenly find themselves short a boat or a car. It's all completely legal on paper. Then came the stunning revelation. I have a contact named Rodriguez in Miami who manages all my special transactions. He handles high-end boats, cars, art, you name it. Gets it out of the country quickly, no questions asked. She even mentioned possessing a painting her late husband had acquired that might be of interest to Rodriguez. Very exclusive, very rare. Ryan arranged for Patricia to deliver both the boat and the painting to a private dock the next evening. I immediately sent the recording to Agent Chin, who was now fully invested. This Rodriguez fits the description of the suspected fence for stolen artwork we've been tracking. Your boat could be the key to finally apprehending him. But Patricia somehow learned of our investigation and intensified her campaign of harassment, sending multiple violation notices each day, having my electricity cut off with false claims, and threatening to place liens on my property. It turned into a race against the clock. The FBI required days to get ready, but my boat was set to leave Tampa within 24 hours. Patricia found out about my investigation when an HOA board member saw me photographing financial records. She quickly called an emergency meeting, branding me a community menace and advocating for harsh penalties. But then something unforeseen occurred. Several neighbors, including Tom, spoke up in my defense. Most astonishingly, Jenny Thompson finally summoned her courage. I've been aware of Patricia's illegal actions for years, she admitted to the stunned group. She's been embezzling from the HOA fund through fake companies and selling residents' property for her own profit. Patricia's face twisted in rage as her meticulously built image fell apart. Stephen Brooks, her lawyer and accomplice, swiftly stepped in, threatening legal action and demanding $100,000 for defamation, coincidentally, the exact sum Ryan had offered for my boat. The attempt at intimidation backfired. Too many residents had heard Jenny's confession. The neighborhood was finally awakening to Patricia's tyranny. Her retaliation became desperate and criminal. She slashed my car tires, destroyed my mailbox, severed power lines, lodged false building code complaints, and even attempted to list my house for sale without my consent. Through my legitimate access to the HOA system, I found that Patricia and Stephen were drafting fraudulent documents to claim ownership of my home, complete with forged signatures and notary seals. I reported this to Agent Chin, but the FBI still needed 48 hours to arrange their operation. Rodriguez is the main target, Chin explained. He's linked to an international smuggling ring moving stolen artifacts worth millions. That night, Patricia rallied her remaining supporters to threaten me with eviction. 5 people gathered in my yard, shouting threats, led by Stephen, who brandished legal papers and vowed to overwhelm me with lawsuits. The standoff ended only when a neighbor called the police, who broke up the crowd but took no further action, classifying it as a civil matter. As they left, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, boat being prepared for transport to Miami tonight. He had been monitoring the marina, pretending to be a potential buyer interested in several boats to maintain his cover. He attached a photo of my chaparral being readied for transport, with a large truck and trailer parked nearby. This was no longer just about harassment. They were speeding up their plans, likely unnerved by the increasing opposition within the community. Through my window, I watched as Patricia's Mercedes pulled up across the street. She just sat there, engine idling, observing my house with a look of triumph. A tow truck pulled up to the community marina to transport my boat. At that moment, my phone vibrated once more. It was a message from Agent Chin. Don't act. We must delay. Rodriguez went dark but has just reappeared. We are tracking him now. My heart sank. The FBI was not prepared, but Patricia was proceeding with her plan. If my boat was taken to Miami that night, I might never see it again, lost in the web of international smuggling. I had to decide, and quickly. The sun was dipping below the lake's horizon, casting long shadows across my lawn as I considered my choices and devised a course of action. I had to make a tough choice: wait for the FBI and risk losing my boat for good, or act on my own and jeopardize their investigation. I paced my living room, running my hands through my hair in agitation. The FBI required more time, but time was a luxury I didn't have. My $78,000 investment, and now, more critically, a key piece of evidence in a federal case, was on the verge of disappearing. I opted for a middle ground. I would use my technical expertise to create an opening that would serve both the FBI's larger investigation and my immediate goal of preventing my boat from being taken. I sat at my computer and began to work. As a software engineer who specialized in Internet of Things, IT systems, I had created numerous remote monitoring and control systems over the years. The GPS trackers I had placed on my boat were merely the start. I had legitimate access to the HOA system backups because I had been commissioned to develop a community alert system following a string of break-ins the previous summer. The board, Patricia included, had granted my access, never imagining I would use it to investigate them. Through this access, I found emails between Patricia and Rodriguez that detailed not only the sale of my boat but also the trade of a stolen Renaissance painting valued at over $3 million, which had been pilfered from a European museum years before. The emails were cautious, employing coded terms, but they were clear enough once you understood what to look for. They called the painting the Italian retirement package and contained details about its provenance that matched a stolen artwork I was able to identify through online research. A lesser-known Caravaggio that had vanished from a small museum in Florence 8 years prior. This was now much more significant than just my boat. I immediately sent this information to Agent Chin, who finally seemed to grasp the urgency of the matter. "Rodriguez must have the painting with him," he said when he called back, his voice strained with excitement. "We've been searching for that piece for years. This could be our chance to catch him with concrete evidence." I could hear him typing quickly as we talked, likely notifying his team. The FBI started to mobilize, but they were still hours from being ready to act. "We're fast-tracking everything," Chin assured me, "but these operations require time to coordinate securely." Meanwhile, Patricia had found the GPS tracker I'd placed on the boat and taken it off, unaware that I had installed a second, hidden device in the navigation system. I could see from the tracking data that the boat was being moved from the community marina to the south end of the lake, where private docks lined the shore. They were acting early, likely spooked by something. Maybe the community meeting or Jenny's confession had made Patricia uneasy. I got in touch with Tom and informed him of the situation. Despite Agent Chin's warnings, we chose to follow from a distance to monitor the situation until the FBI could get there. We used Tom's old pickup truck, parking it on a service road that offered a view of the shoreline where my boat's tracker indicated it was headed. With binoculars, we could see a large man with thinning hair giving directions to Patricia's associate as he steered my boat toward a secluded cove where a black Mercedes van was parked. The man fit the description of Rodriguez from the file Tom had shown me: middle-aged, stocky, with slick-back hair and the assured bearing of someone accustomed to being in charge. "That's definitely him," Tom whispered, lowering his binoculars. "Miguel Rodriguez. He was a person of interest in at least 3 of my old cases, but we could never get anything to stick. Slippery as an eel." We observed as Rodriguez paced by the van, nervously checking his watch. Patricia's car arrived, and she got out, holding a thin rectangular package wrapped in cloth, presumably the painting. I called Agent Chun to give him the updated location, and he assured me they were en route but still at least 30 minutes away. "Do not engage, Mike. These people could be dangerous," he cautioned again, the sound of sirens barely audible in the background of the call. But as I watched Patricia walk toward the dock where my boat had just been moored, I knew we were about to miss our chance. Rodriguez looked jumpy, prepared to flee at the slightest hint of trouble. That's when I recalled the remote access system I had installed on my boat. As a software engineer specializing in IT devices, I had built a custom system that let me control various electronic functions on the boat from afar. Originally intended for checking battery levels and turning on the climate control before a day on the water, the system had its own cellular connection and backup power, making it independent of the boat's main electrical system, a feature I had added after once being stranded with a dead battery miles from shore. I took out my laptop, connected to a mobile hotspot, and accessed the system. The interface was straightforward, a dashboard I had created myself with controls for different functions. With a few commands, I could manage everything from the navigation lights to the bilge pumps. But what I needed now was a distraction, something to interrupt the deal without endangering anyone or revealing the FBI's involvement. "What are you doing?" Tom asked, watching my fingers race across the keyboard. "Creating a diversion," I answered, a plan taking shape in my head. "If we can delay them just long enough for the FBI to get here, we can catch them all red-handed with both my boat and the stolen art." Agent Chin and I sat in his unmarked FBI vehicle, observing as Patricia directed her associate, who was piloting my boat to the secluded rendezvous point. Rodriguez stood by his van, anxiously looking over his shoulder. The GPS tracker indicated they were now moving toward the center of the lake instead of the prearranged meeting spot. "She knows we're watching," Agent Chin said with a note of frustration. I just smiled. "No, she doesn't know about Plan B." I opened my laptop and logged into my boat's custom control system. With a few clicks, I triggered the emergency alarm. Immediately, the boat's horn started blaring nonstop, and all the navigation lights flashed like strobes. Through my binoculars, I could see Patricia's man desperately trying to disable it while she yelled at him, her face a mask of panic. "Remote access," I explained to Chin. "I built the system myself. They can't turn it off without the master code." Rodriguez instantly concluded it was a police raid. He leaped into his van and sped away, heading straight into the FBI tactical team that was blocking the only road out. Agents descended on the van, discovering documents for the illegal boat transaction and the stolen Renaissance painting worth over $3 million, along with several other artifacts on international watch lists. Patricia attempted to flee as her associate brought the still wailing boat to shore. She sprinted toward her Mercedes, clutching a USB drive filled with incriminating evidence. With another command from my laptop, I remotely locked her car doors, another perk of my IT skills. She was stuck until FBI agents surrounded her car. The expression on Patricia's face as agents approached with weapons drawn was priceless. Shock, morphing into disbelief, and finally, resignation. They retrieved the USB drive, which contained falsified HOA documents, financial records of illegal transactions, and communications with buyers of stolen property. They also discovered $50,000 in cash in her purse, Rodriguez's deposit for my boat and the painting. As agents escorted a handcuffed Patricia away, our eyes met. Her facade shattered completely, revealing not a confident tyrant but a desperate, trapped woman. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed. "This goes higher than you can imagine." Patricia frantically tried to shift the blame to the HOA board and Stephen, asserting she was merely adhering to protocols. "I'm the victim here," she yelled. But Ginny had already supplied the agents with extensive proof of Patricia's fraudulent schemes spanning years. Stephen was apprehended at his home later, caught in the act of shredding documents. He immediately started to cooperate with prosecutors, trading evidence against Patricia for a more lenient sentence. Agent Chin later informed me that they had been investigating Patricia peripherally but had lacked sufficient evidence until I came forward. "Your boat led us to Rodriguez, and Rodriguez led us to one of the most significant art recovery operations in FBI history. That painting alone is worth millions, but the collection in his warehouse is estimated at over $30 million. The fallout was swift and gratifying. Patricia was confronted with numerous charges: fraud, money laundering, trafficking in stolen goods, and theft. Rodriguez was taken into custody, pending extradition to Europe for art theft. My boat was returned to me promptly, though it took several hours to deactivate the alarms I had set off. As I cleaned it the following day, wiping away Patricia's fingerprints from its polished exterior, I felt a deep sense of resolution. The HOA was restructured with Tom as the interim president, dedicated to transparency and equity. His first action was to revoke all of Patricia's emergency regulations and establish a system that required multiple approvals for any new rules. Stephen Brooks, the corrupt lawyer, was disbarred and faced his own set of charges for conspiracy and document fraud. Ginny was promoted to HOA executive director, tasked with helping to establish new protections against the abuse of power. "I should have said something sooner," Ginny confessed to me tearfully at the first post-Patricia HOA meeting. "I was so scared of losing my job, of not being able to provide for my family. I didn't comprehend how many people she was harming." I assured her that her decision to speak up when she did had been pivotal. Sometimes courage isn't about being fearless from the start, it's about finding your voice when it counts. As for myself, I became a sort of local hero. I applied my technical abilities to create a community alert system to stop future Karens from misusing their authority. My background as a software engineer with hardware expertise had turned out to be more useful than I could have ever predicted in dismantling a criminal operation running right in my own neighborhood. Several neighbors asked me about installing similar systems in their houses, and I even got job offers from security companies who were impressed by my improvised boat alarm. 6 months later, I took my boat out on a lovely Sunday afternoon, relishing the peace and quiet that had finally been restored to lakeside estates. The water was still, reflecting the clear blue sky like a polished surface. I cut the engine in the middle of the lake, allowing the boat to drift as I opened a cold beer, a simple act that now felt like a major triumph. As I floated near a small cove, I saw a woman in a kayak waving at me. It was Jamie, a new neighbor who had moved in after what everyone now referred to as the Patricia scandal. She had bought one of the properties seized from Patricia's assets, a beautiful lakefront house that had once belonged to one of Patricia's shell companies. Jamie was in her mid-30s, a marine biologist who had relocated to Tampa for a research role at the university. "Nice boat," she shouted as she paddled nearer. "Mind if I climb aboard?" I brought extra beer. She lifted a small cooler with a smile that made my heart race. We started a conversation that turned into a dinner date, which led to more dinners. Before long, we were spending most of our weekends together on the water. Patricia was sentenced to 12 years in a federal penitentiary after pleading guilty to lesser charges in return for information about other smuggling rings. Her assets were confiscated to repay her victims, including several former residents who had left after being targeted by her schemes. Rodriguez was extradited to Europe to stand trial for art theft. Tom was elected as the official HOA president, instituting numerous beneficial changes for the community, including a transparent financial system and strict controls on the board's authority to levy fines. One day, I got an email from Agent Chun letting me know that, thanks to the evidence from our case, the FBI had dismantled the entire smuggling network Rodriguez was a part of. They recovered over $30 million in stolen art and artifacts, some of which had been missing for decades. Museums across Europe organized special exhibitions to display the reclaimed treasures, and I received a personal letter of thanks from the director of the Florence Museum from which the Caravaggio had been stolen. In a peculiar turn of events, I received a package from prison. It was a letter of apology from Patricia, along with the keys to a small beach house in the Keys that she had managed to conceal from the FBI. The letter was unexpected, a confusing mix of regret and self-defense that revealed more about her true character than she probably intended. "I never meant for it to go this far," she wrote. "It began with just one opportunity, then another, and before I realized it, I couldn't stop. The power became intoxicating. I passed the keys to Linda, her daughter, telling her she deserved a fresh start away from her mother's influence. Linda was deeply grateful, thanking me with tears in her eyes for showing kindness despite everything her mother had done. She wasn't always this way," Linda confided. "After Dad died, something inside her broke. Money and control became her everything. It was a poignant reminder that even the biggest antagonists in our lives are still human, molded by their own personal tragedies and weaknesses." So, that is my story. Sometimes, justice is slow, but it ultimately reaches those who have it coming. Patricia is now serving an extended sentence in federal prison, and I am enjoying quiet weekend boat trips, often with Jamie by my side. It seems there is a lesson to be learned from every Karen, and mine was to never underestimate a software engineer with an abundance of free time and a boat to get back. And remember, sometimes the most satisfying victory isn't when you get revenge. It's when you can lean back and let karma take its course. But if karma needs a little assistance from the FBI, well, I'm not one to judge.